Well, good morning, everybody. Just want to start you off with an article that I read last night after finishing the in-depth report. This one comes from NOAA, and what it's looking at here is their forecast for what they call the summer dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is a hypoxic area at the mouth of the Mississippi River. And one of the interesting things they're doing this year, looking at a below average total extent of that, is if you slide down through the article and give it a good read, you'll see they give a great map of where the Mississippi drainage basin is. So we kind of include all of the rivers that eventually get into the Mississippi here as a part of that, and that includes over 40% of the land area of the lower 48. And one of the reasons they cite for this is that the discharge rate in May was about 33% below the long-term average. So we start to think about that in the context of where the driest conditions have been throughout the United States in May and what other things it's impacting. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Another thing we're going to be looking at again today is air quality. One of my favorite sites here. This is from map.purpleair.com. One of the things it does is it maps out particulate matter 2.5. So that's essentially looking at the diameter of the particulate matter in the atmosphere, 2.5 microns. And you can see here that these values are extremely high, where we're still dealing with a lot of that wildfire smoke that has been coming out of Quebec over the last few days. So another great site just to kind of monitor these things and keep a close eye on them. Next, I want to take you to something I haven't shown you very often. It's the GRACE, which is a satellite. It's a root zone soil map. And this one goes back to May 29th. They should be updating this very, very soon here. Now, I've been asked, why don't I show it more often? And that's simply because I find that one of the things that this doesn't capture very well is kind of the near-term fluctuations. I think the NASA product does better. That would be the actual modeled NASA data that I typically show you, that we know that that server is still down. But I just want to make a point here that to kind of complement the NOAA article, we do see here at the end of May such a significant portion of the Mississippi drainage basin with well below average root zone soil moisture. What I find more instructive, though, is just to look at precipitation anomaly maps, and that's the one you're looking at here. So it's just an updated version of the map I show you quite often. This is through yesterday morning on the 5th, and it just shows us the last 30 days in terms of percent of normal. We just continue to see, even though there's been a lot of scattered thunderstorms that have come through parts of the western Corn Belt down into the Delta region here, there's still very large areas that have missed out on precipitation in the month of May, and there's just a tremendous concern here. The greatest concern comes into the Great Lakes Basin, especially lower Michigan, and then into New England. This has been an area where we have places that have not measured precipitation in over 30 days. So it's just something I'm quite concerned about. Let's analyze this another way really quickly. I want to show you another great website. This is from NOAA. We're going to be using their Vegetation Health Index. And what I've done is I've gone into the United States. I've selected a crop type, and you have a lot to select from here. And I'll link this below so you have access to it. But I chose maize or corn, and I just wanted to look historically at drought from 2009 to 2023, just to kind of get an idea. We just have to look at this in context, and that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to show you where we currently sit here versus some, quite important historic time periods of drought. So, a lot of folks want to know what was going on in 13 and then 11 and then into 12 and 13. So this would allow you to kind of take a look at that per crop. So I want you to go check that out. And there's one other website I want you to play around with today if you get a chance. I'll link this one below as well. I use it a lot, but I wanted to give you a quick demonstration on how I get to the plots that I get to. So I'll give you this link. And when you get here, I want you to slide over and click on admin level number 1 right down there. That breaks everything down by state or province. You can then zoom in on any part of the world you want to zoom in on. And what I want to do is I want to specifically look at that dry Mississippi basin here and just kind of start to stitch together a few states. So I'm just going to go through it real quick. Now, I know a lot of North Dakota drains into Lake Winnipeg from the Red River, but I'm going to include it in this analysis. So I'm going to rapid fire click on some states here. And we're just kind of picking out these states that are, if I can get enough of these done here, there we go, kind of in that primary corn and soybean area. Now, over here, you can choose years. I'm going to take off 2022 so you can just see the current year, 2023, compared to the historical average. So we typically reach a peak NDVI value right around the beginning of August. And here we are sitting at this point at the end of May, beginning of June, and it is below average, as you can see. What's nice about this, though, is you can go in and look at other years. So, for example, maybe I wanted to toss on a really good year, like 2018. That was a good year for a lot of people. We were about at the same place, but then we really took off in June to the highest NDVI values in the 20-year distribution. A year I've tossed around a lot, 2009, was actually kind of similar. We were actually right about the same spot, and we just kind of hovered right around this average number for a while. You can also toss on years like 2012 and just kind of have a look. We're actually higher in 2012 in the NDVI value, but the drought got really bad at the end of June and then through July. So that's your lowest one on the distribution here through August. So great site. I know I just picked on the Corn Belt here. You can use this for any state in the, of course, in the country, and then anywhere you want to around the world. Just wanted to give you a quick demo on what I click on to get these so that you can do it when you'd like to. Okay, let's come back to some satellite data here this morning. And the sun is rising right here over this low that's spinning off the coast. But I want to take you back to yesterday, and again, we can see all of that smoke in this area, the scattered and isolated storms under very weak wind shear that just throughout this section of the country up through the western and high plains, and then the depth of the low that is spinning over Southern California. This is really, truly impressive. Now, what I am waiting on and hoping for is that right there. I know it's not much, but just watch right here. As I just kind of slide through, that is the subtropical jet that we are waiting to punch through this pattern to give us a better look at, getting more precipitation into some very dry regions here. And one last thing to point out, that line you see there, that's just the day-night line. So we're switching from visible imagery to infrared, and it's about at its greatest angle. You know that here in a couple weeks we'll hit our solstice, and that will be when it's at its greatest angle. You can also see up here the black, that is where we're seeing fires using the infrared satellite imagery. Now, our overall flow pattern is very much the same, and we continue to see these weak lows that are kind of spinning off the west coast, but very stagnant flow in the midsection of the country. And again, we've been talking a lot about the very dry air that's coming into this section of the country right now. But I got to talk to you about that dry air because I'm a bit surprised at some of this morning's model runs, because we note that going through getting here out to Wednesday and then Thursday. Look how dry this air is here on Wednesday night, dew point temperatures in the 20s. But there are some indications that as this front pushes through, look at what it's going to push up against, okay? There's actually higher moisture content against that front. And now we're going to start to see better chances, I think, of getting some moisture to squeeze out of the wetter side of that frontal boundary. And I want to point out at the end of this animation, so here we go through the weekend, we're going to watch for some rain to possibly come into this area this weekend. By the end of this forecast animation, we actually start to see something quite different. Very dry air coming into the Pacific Northwest. And this is the potential wave break we're going to be seeing in the 500 millibar height pattern that we're anticipating to start to open up the eastern United States to better precipitation, but that's coming in a second. And what I'm watching carefully here as I play this forward is as that frontal boundary slides through Iowa, southern Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. This is now Wednesday morning. There are these chances along the leading edge of that very dry air and high pressure that we could get some good rising motion and the chance for some showers. This is not heavy rain, but there's the chance for some showers to come through this particular area, which is part of our very dry region that surrounds the Great Lakes Basin. So this is getting through Wednesday morning, out there to Wednesday afternoon and evening. It spreads right over Kentucky, Tennessee, hits the Appalachian Mountains. Outside of that, the story's the same, just storms all in through here, okay? But that's that frontal boundary diving down here and eventually gets over parts of Virginia and North Carolina. And as this comes sliding through, it just has the chance for bringing in some moisture. So if I just kind of play this out and kind of look at what that total moisture is, it looks something like that in the NAM model. So 60-hour forecast, there could be an area in through here that gets a bit more of a steady shower rather than an isolated storm. And this is going to help hit part of that really dry region. Now, I want to show you what the models are still doing for the 7-day outlook. So that's just a 60-hour forecast. Let's blow this out to 168. So this is the 0Z run from the WPC, and this is what their latest update is. There's some very good news coming into parts of Kansas and Missouri out of this pattern. You're going to continue to see that corridor. This is kind of that Same drawing I've given you for a while. That's the area through which we expect the best rains to start to slide through. And here are the newest outlooks from both the GFS and the ECMWF. And I'm going to be watching particularly right in through here. So ready? So this is Tuesday morning right there. This is now Wednesday morning. Can you see the GFS and the European are attempting to bring in moisture into this area as well on the leading edge of that very dry air behind it. And then it gets over into Kentucky, Tennessee, and North Carolina. That's it. We got to watch that one carefully. Now beyond that, drier air sinks in, and then we just keep seeing the storms pop in the same locations. This is out there on Friday. There's another front coming through, born on that high pressure cell by Saturday, and you can start to see where it's pushing to the south in both models here. So as we go from Saturday into Sunday, we're going to bring that front farther to the south. The GFS right now is wetter for Michigan. It's wetter for Illinois. European model's more wet back here into parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, but there's a frontal boundary coming through, bringing in chances for precip on Saturday, Sunday. And then again, moving through Indiana and Ohio. Michigan desperately need this rain. And then the model is very different right there. Now, look at the size of the high pressure cell 7 a.m. on Monday morning that the GFS brings in. It's not there in the European. And the difference by not having that high pressure cell is that the European's going to attempt to curl up this low. Major difference from the last couple model runs. And I know I kept telling you, hey, we need the GFS to verify. This tells you how much things change just in a 5 to 7 day forecast. We now want the European to be right and to not have such a strong high pressure behind it and curl this low up and get some rain to Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New York. And that's what it's showing. Now we know the model variability even out at this time period, 5 to 7 days, is still quite high. But I can go ahead and show you what the models are forecasting. Let's blow that up one more time. There we go. So here we are. So that's the first front, European model. And here's the second one. And as that low, I'm staring right here, by the way, in that driest spot in the Midwest. As that low curls up, this would be Monday, Sunday night, Monday, Tuesday. That is going to be key to watch going forward. Now that takes us out there. Let's just take this back a couple steps. That's the 168-hour forecast. That's 7 days right there. This is what the GFS is doing. It still brings in the moisture, but no low curling up in this area. So we compare those forecasts, and now we see, very interestingly, the European model, which is represented in these colors being wetter, is the wettest here from the latest run. So let's watch that carefully. Now let's flip over to the ensemble forecast. This is the 10-day probability of grabbing at least an inch. And what has happened, the big change in the European model, is now these probabilities are up here in this 50 to 70% range in this area. Previous runs were much lower. We can compare this to the GFS, there it is, which continues to show the highest probabilities a bit farther to the west and to the south as to having the heaviest rains in through here. But still, the models are producing that moisture. Now, what's going to change once we get out there past the 16th is the overall flow. So let's go have a quick look at this. For much of the next few days, just the large ridge that was here over the central United States is just going to retrograde back over to parts of Alberta, making things quite hot and quite dry except for isolated storms. We then see as we play into Monday and Tuesday, this is when the potential wave break could happen. So you have something going on like this. And the next thing I'll be watching is the strength of the subtropical jet running over this ridge. I know it's not the Bermuda High. The Bermuda High is still hanging out way over here, and we can't seem to ditch these troughs in this area. But it is a catalyst for change right here. So as we play this out to the 15th, 16th, and 17th, we now see a bit of a high over low setup in the west, and that brings flow in and around. We'll get ridge riders out of this, and that's going to really start to pick up the chances for storms going into week 2. Right now, the week 2 forecast from the models, notice that the the CPC has taken off the very dry outlook it had for the Great Lakes states. It is still in there in the European model, though not as dry, but the GFS has really opened up a large corridor to better precipitation, keeping the driest air down along the Gulf Coast. And that's where we're going to keep an eye on going forward. Last few things here on temperatures. Let's just walk through the next 7 days of high temperatures. Here's today's highs. Getting into tomorrow, a lot of heat going into the Pacific Northwest, northern plains into the 90s. There's Thursday, major cool down behind that front as we anticipated. California's staying cooler with those cutoff lows. There's Friday's highs, getting into Saturday and Sunday and Monday. So this is the beginning of that cooler stretch of weather in through this area. When I say cooler, I'm just talking about relative to normal. So before I go beyond the next 7 days, here's a quick look at the evaporation over the next 7 days. We've seen the numbers back off in this area. Here's a look at 7-day GDDs. They have also come down a little bit in this area. This is a region we're going to see cool down a little bit. And if we look at that temperature pattern, this is that 5-day sliding window. You park this out here at day 5 through 10, which gets us from the 11th through the 16th. We can see the position of where the ridging has moved and where the heat will be throughout the Canadian prairie. I still expect isolated storms, but this is more stress on the Canadian prairie. And then we play this out beyond that. And at that point, we start to see the ridge opening. So now we get this. And that's going to bring in warmth, and it's also going to bring in moisture. And I want to show you that to finish this up. So our last animation is looking at the probability of packing into the atmosphere 1.5 inches of water. Now this isn't rain, this is just putting moisture in the atmosphere. And we see there's the really dry air that's coming in, so just along the leading edge we've got the moisture. Probability of at least 1.5 inches of precipitable water. We go into this weekend, again, keeping it pretty far south in the European, but watch. That's everything clearing out early next week, and then here's the rebuilding. Now you just see the moisture, watch it just climbing up into this area on that ridge. And this is why that pattern doing this is starting to open this up to more storms, and that would be more typical of El Nino. And by the way, one last thing to show you here. I believe BOM updated their El Nino outlook. Let's go have a quick look at this. Pacific Ocean, yes, they are now up in their watch category. And holy smokes, I haven't looked at this yet. Sorry, I just know the dates they do this. They are now predicting through our hurricane season to be back up here in that 2.8 degrees C range. I'll talk more about that tomorrow, though. Have a good one. We'll talk to you then.